In this video, you will learn to divide any size number by a one-digit number. Now to begin, we want to know different ways we can express division. So we could say this in English, something like 50 divided by 2, or by 10. Now this is in English, but we don't want to have to write out the phrase divided by every time. So we could also use a division sign, like this right here, or we can write as a fraction. 50 over 10 also means division. So 3 different ways we can express a division problem. Now with a division problem, there are different parts to the problem. So using the same example, 50 divided by 10 equals 5. The 50, the first number, is called the dividend. The second number, the 10, is called the divisor. And the third number, the solution, is called the quotient. Now, I'll be honest, the terms dividend and divisor are maybe not used as often as the word quotient, but you know all 3 terms. Quotient, especially know this because you will see this a lot as you progress in your study of math. Now, with the different parts of a division problem, there are different relationships between them. So using a different example, if we had 40 divided by 10 equals 4, this is a true statement, where 40 is your dividend, 10 is your divisor, and 4 is your quotient. Now I color coordinated this to help you visualize what we're doing. All right, so something else we can do is if we switch the 10 and the 4, we also get a true statement. So if we switch the 10 and the 4, as you see here, and you'd have now the dividend divided by the quotient, that would now equal the divisor. So we can switch the 10 and the 4 and still have a true statement. And then another thing we could do is if we can take the quotient times the divisor. So 4 times 10 would equal the dividend, which is 40. All right, so different relationships between a division problem. Now this last one right here with the multiplication, this can be used to check the accuracy of your answer. So if you're not sure if you divided correctly, you can always take the quotient times the divisor and see if you truly have the correct answer, because it should always equal the dividend. Now with that being said, let's get into an actual division problem. So here we're going to learn the division process. And our first example, we have 837 divided by 6. Now when you divide, it's helpful if you set it up like this right here, where you have 837 inside of this little thing we have, and then a 6, put the 6 on the left side. Now once you have this set up correctly, we now can begin the process. So to begin, what you want to do is you want to take the 6 and you want to see how many times will that go into the number 8. So we want to know how many times will 6 go into 8 without going over. So for example, if we put 1 6, we would have 6, right? 1 times 1 6 would be 6. That would fit into 8. Okay, but if we put 2 6s, 2 times 6 is 12, that's too big. So 6 can go into 8 one time. So we put a 1 up here. Now from this point, once we have that number, we can then take the 1 and multiply it by the 6. So 1 times 6 is 6. We write that number right down here. Our next step is to subtract. So we do 8 minus 6, which would give us 2. All right, and then lastly, we can bring down this next number, the 3, to get 23, and then begin the process all over again. So that is all the steps, and now we just repeat the process until we get through all the numbers in the problem. So now from here, we have to see how many times does 6 go into 23 without going over. So if we think through 3 6s would give 18, we can fit 3 6s into 23, but we cannot fit 4 6s into 23 because 4 times 6 is 24, which is too big. So I can fit 3 6s into 23. So we put a 3 up here on the top. So now we have the 3. We now take 3 times the 6 to get 18, and then we subtract. So 23 minus 18 is 5. So we have 5 here, and then we bring down the 7 to get 57, and then repeat the process one last time. So how many times does 6 go into 57? Well, that's going to be 9, because it goes in 9 times to get 54. If we went bigger than that, like 10 for example, 10 is too big because 10 sixes is 60, which is bigger than 57. So our number is going to be 9. So we put a 9 up here, and then we multiply 9 times 6 to get 54, and then subtract to get 3. So at this point, we have some options. So we've gone through all the numbers. We have a remainder. So this is called a remainder. It's a number that's left over after the division process. So the remainder, we can sometimes just write it, just write and say that we have a remainder of 3, sometimes written as R3, like remainder of 3. But typically we want to write the remainder as a fraction or keep going and get a decimal. So to write as a fraction, what we do is we take this remainder of 3 and put it over the 6. So the remainder 3 would be divided into 6 to get 3 over 6, which would equal 139 and 1/2. All right, so our answer is 139 and a half. So we can write with a fraction as we see here, or our other option is once we have gone through this whole process, we get to the 3, we can keep going to get a decimal. So to do that, we would have to put a point and then a 0 at the end of 837. And then we can continue this process where we bring down the 0 to get 30, and then we see how many times does 6 go into 30. And that's going to be 5 times exactly, right? 5 times 6 is 30. So put a 5 up here. 5 times 6 is 30. Subtract, we get a remainder of 0. So once we have a remainder of 0, that means we're officially done with dividing. And just take note of the decimal point in your final answer. The decimal point is lined up with the decimal point down here in the 837.0. So our final answer is 139.5. So 2 options. We can write it as a fraction or as a decimal. And I guess sometimes we could just write that we have a remainder of 3, but typically it's better to write it in one of these 2 ways. And by the way, if the remainder here is not a 0, after going and adding that extra 0 at the end, we'd have to continue again, put another 0, repeat the process, and keep going until we have a remainder of 0. And if it just keeps going, if it's irrational, meaning it keeps going on forever without getting a remainder of 0, then what that means is you can just probably round your final answer to some decimal point. Let's take a look at one more example. Here we have 83 divided by 4. So first off, we want to get set up. So we have 83 on the inside and 4 on the outside. And then we ask ourselves, how many times does 4 go into 8 without going over? And that's going to be 2, because 4 goes into 8 2 times. So we have a 2 we put up here, then we multiply 2 times 4 to get 8. So we put 8 right there, and then subtract 8 minus 8 to get 0. And then we bring down the 3 to get a 3 right here. And then we repeat the process all over again. So now we ask ourselves, how many times does 4 go into 3? And that's going to be 0 times. Okay, 4 does not go into 3 at all. So we put a 0 up here, and then we take the 0 times the 4 to get 0. Put that down here, and then subtract. 3 minus 0 gives 3. So we've gone through all the numbers in the original problem, but there's still a remainder of 3. So what that means is I need to add a point and then a 0, and then bring down the 0 and repeat the process again. So now we have 30 down here. And then we see how many times does 4 go into 30. So 4 goes into 30 7 times. So we put a 7 up here on the top. Don't forget the decimal point lines up with this point right here. And then we take 7 times 4 to get 28. So we put 28 there, subtract to get 2, and we have a remainder again, which means we can continue on and put another 0 after the 83, and then bring that extra 0 down to now have 20, and then repeat the process again. How many times does 4 go into 20? And that goes in 5 times exactly. So let's put a 5 up here, and then multiply 5 times the 4 to get 20. Then you subtract to get 0. So now the remainder is 0, which means we are done with the division process, and our answer is 20.75. And again, if the remainder is not a 0, we could add another 0 up here and continue the process until we finish, or just round at a certain point instead of going on forever. Now, one last thing I want to show you is how we can check our answer. So as mentioned previously in this video, we said that we can take your quotient and multiply it by the divisor, and that should equal the dividend. Meaning if we take this 20.75, multiply it by 4, if we did our division correctly, our answer should equal 83. So let's check that. 20.75 times 4. So if we multiply 20.75 times 4, we get 4 times 5, which is 20. So take the 0, carry the 2. 4 times 7 plus 2 is 30. Take the 0, carry the 3. 4 times 0 plus 3 is 3. And 4 times 2 is 8. So we have 8300 and the decimal point, because we have 2 numbers here after the decimal point. Our final answer also needs 2 numbers after the decimal point as well, which puts it right there after the 3. And that means our answer is 83. So because that number matches up with this, the original dividend, that means we did the division process correctly. And that concludes our lesson for today. We will see you next time.